Welcome to Free Marketing Fridays, 20 minutes to give you actionable advice that you can use today. We all need to work smarter, not harder. And in this 20 minutes, it's designed to help you do just that. So there's no fluff, there's no hustle bro anything. I'm not going to pitch you on buying a course or a paid community, just actionable advice that you can use today. So we have all been there, deep in the Sunday scaries, staring at the content calendar, like low-key panicking about what to schedule this week. Is it the right thing? Is it going to land the way we need it to? Will it actually produce results to help us reach our goals? And then there's this terrible what if spiraling that leaves you totally and completely vapor locked, unable to do anything at all. We've all been there. But here's the thing. You're not stuck and vapor locked because you and your team don't have ideas. You're stuck because you think you need to create everything from scratch. And it has to be brand spanking new, or you feel like you have to come up with a completely new way to message the same things you've been talking about forever. And both of those things just aren't quite true. You have more content than you think you do. It's sitting there in your Google Drive, in your Dropbox, just gathering digital dust, begging for a second chance at life. So today I'm going to show you how to turn your content graveyard into tons of fresh content to fill your calendar. So today's going to be part reality check, part brainstorm fodder, as well as a group therapy session because I'm guilty of doing some of these things as well, and I need to change my ways. So let's go. Here's how we're going to be spending our 20 minutes together. First, I'm going to convince you that your content graveyard is actually a gold mine. And then I'm going to walk you through a 4-step process to turn one piece of content into a full calendar of content so that you can stop panicking. And because I love a good example, I'm going to show you how last week's Free Marketing Fridays webinar becomes more than 15 different pieces of content that I can publish over the next 2 months. And then a good reality check isn't doing a whole lot of anything if you don't get a homework assignment that you can start tackling this afternoon. So we'll get into that as well. Let's get going here. If we haven't met before, and I know that there are some new people in the chat, hi, my name's Sunny Hunt. I am the Chief Customer Nerd here at Hunt Interaction, and we help recurring revenue companies grow their customer base in smarter and more efficient ways, starting with their most profitable customers. And my work typically lives at the intersection of customer research, strategic customer growth, and revenue acceleration. And I've worked with all of these companies and a ton more on helping them overcome their customer growth challenges. I've also worked with companies that are across 15 different industries. And the thing that most of them have in common, surprisingly enough, is that their customer growth challenges are pretty similar. It's just the particulars of solving those challenges that tend to vary. Let's talk about the trap most of us fall into. And if you're Gen X like I am, you probably thought that you'd be a lot more worried about quicksand in real life and maybe just a little disappointed that it actually didn't materialize that way. But oops, just kidding. The quicksand is actually in your work life, not real physical life. And it really doesn't look like quicksand at all, even though it is a trap that's created by our brains. Because brains are dumb and they lie to us on the regular. But here's our quicksand trap. We think that good content means constantly creating new stuff. So we burn ourselves out trying to come up with fresh new ideas all the time. Meanwhile, we've got presentations from last year, webinars from 6 months ago, and blog posts that have performed really well that are just sitting there doing a whole lot of nothing. And then all of this content is missing a compound effect. When your content works harder for you over time instead of you working harder to create all of your content. Most successful content strategies aren't built on endless creativity. They're built on smart repurposing and reusing what they've already created. And the companies that are doing this well, they're not necessarily more creative. They're just better at making their content work harder for them. So if you think that you can't possibly repurpose your content, say the same thing over and over and over again, and you feel like you need a refreshed core message to keep your audience's attention, here's something that I tell my clients. When you're sick of saying the same message, that's when your audience starts to listen. We live in very noisy spaces where the signal to noise ratio is completely out of whack. And I think it was Forrester a couple years ago that said instead of your audience interacting with the same message like 5 times, they need to hear it over 15 times in order for them to really start paying attention to what you're saying. So what does this mean for you? It means that you need to be obnoxious with your messages and the number of times that you repeat them and so that you can cut through all of the noise that's out there in the world, in social channels, in inboxes, on websites, at events. You have to be so sick of hearing yourself say the same thing over and over and over again, because it's only then that someone who needs to hear your message is going to hear it for the first time. So keep going. Be obnoxious with your messages. Now that I've given you a reality check and permission to be completely obnoxious, um, let's get a reality check on how fresh your content and messages really need to be. So let's walk through the 4 steps to repurpose and atomize your content and give it new life and legs and let it stretch and reach new people who haven't seen it yet. Here is the 4-step content cure process. It's 4 steps, that's it. I'm going to walk you through each one, and then we're going to go into a little bit more detail. You can use this process or you can just wing it and repurpose your content, but it's really helpful to have a guide, especially when you're pressed for time and overwhelmed with everything else that you have to do. Step 1, you got to gather your content. You have to know what you're going to be actually repurposing. Step 2, you got to get clear on who you're talking to and where you need to speak to them. Step 3, you got to map your big content to smaller formats. And step 4 is adapting your tone for each channel. It seems simple enough, but there's a little bit of nuance involved with each one of these 4 steps. Let's start breaking it down. Number 1, you need to go treasure hunting in your own files. I want you to audit what you already have: webinars, blog posts, presentations you've given, case studies, even internal documents that could be useful to your audience. And you have to make sure that what that content aligns with the problems that your customers are trying to solve and the customer insight data that you have to back up that decision. If customers are telling you that your customer service or supportive education after the sale or the implementation was a lot easier than they thought it would be, if they're telling you that those are your primary competitive differentiators and you have content that directly aligns with one or more of those, focus on that content that supports those topics. It's an easy pick that makes your life a lot easier and will help resonate with your customers or your potential customers. Second, I want you to look for evergreen content, content that's still relevant and useful. So pulling up a report from 2019 that you want to repurpose may not be as helpful as pulling up a report that you have that is refreshed every single year, that has certain key points that you need to reemphasize. If you can avoid re-recording a webinar or redoing your work in any particular way, that is going to save you so much time and heartache. And definitely look at your best performing content. What got the most engagement? What drove results? What did people actually respond to? And if you want to know what your best performing content really is, talk to your sales team. Ask them what they're hearing and what drove people, or if they're mentioning different reports or different webinars that they attended or different pieces of content that help kind of drive them to that point where they were actually talking to a salesperson. And here's the key. Don't overthink this. Don't get too precious about it. You're not looking for perfection. You're looking for content that has good bones that you can build on. Even a presentation that you gave 2 years ago can become like 5 different LinkedIn posts if it's still relevant, especially to your customers. Second step, getting clear on who you're talking to and where they're participating. So who are you trying to reach with each piece of content? Are you talking to CEOs or individual contributors, new prospects, existing customers? You need to get specific with this. And you need to know enough about the channels that these audiences use, especially if you're trying to attract prospects that look like your existing profitable customers. Like, this isn't where you have the most reach or a social channel where you have the most followers. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best channel. These are channels, the channels that I'm talking about are the channels where you have the most impact. And impact is measured differently depending on your business. Then you need to match your content complexity to your audience sophistication. Your existing customers can handle more technical details, or you can play more inside baseball with features and retention tactics than prospects who are just new and fresh to learning about your product. So you need to be specific about who it is, what their level of sophistication is in the channels that they're in. And then only create content for the channels that you can actually maintain. Consistency is going to beat perfection every single time. So if you're not showing up consistently, it's probably not a channel that you need to be paying attention to. Step 3 is about your formats. And just know that one channel can support multiple content formats. So you're not stuck with just text on LinkedIn or graphics on Instagram. You can create both around the same message, or you can use video and text in both of those channels. But a couple of things you need to keep in mind with formats. Number one, start with your strengths. If you're a strong writer, lean into text-based content, LinkedIn posts, email newsletters, blog expansions. If you're great on camera, focus on video content. And then think about what formats you can produce consistently. This is where a lot of people mess up. They get super excited and they commit to creating content that they actually can't sustain week after week. And then don't commit to formats without the resources or support to back them up. So don't decide just to turn everything into video clips if you don't have a video editor. And don't go heavy on visual content if you're constantly battling for brand approval or if you don't have templates or design support locked down. And you have to be honest about what your team can execute well without burning out. You can always expand to new formats later when you have better systems and more resources in place. The goal here is to focus on one piece of content becoming multiple formats and multiple smaller pieces of content, but only the formats that you can handle consistently. Step 4 is adapting your tone for each channel. The same insight or message that works on LinkedIn might need a slightly different energy for your newsletter, or a conference pitch is going to sound completely different than a casual social media post. The thing is, you're not changing your message, you're changing how you deliver it. So for instance, LinkedIn tends to be more professional and direct, email can be more personal, social media might be more conversational. I even heard somebody on TikTok refer to different channels as the number of beers that you've consumed. So for instance, LinkedIn would be like 1 beer, like super professional. But then TikTok is like 4 beers. So it's completely unhinged and off the hook. But just identify where you want to play and what the tone is that's appropriate for your brand. If you have a completely unhinged brand, go nuts, right? But just make sure that you are adjusting your tone so that you are getting the intended effect for the audience in that channel. And then here's the time-saving tip. Batch your content creation. So sit down once and create all the versions you need instead of doing them one at a time. If you're doing visual social posts in Canva for a particular piece of content, do all of them at the same time and reformat for sizes as you need for each channel. So it's time to put my money where my mouth is, right? So I'm going to walk you through an example. Let's take last week's Free Marketing Fridays webinar and slice and dice it into little snippets of content that I can use across different channels for the next couple of months. This is great for me because I haven't been really good about atomizing my own content, and these webinars actually do take up a big chunk of time to create. So for me to get the most out of them, I've got to be smart about how I use my own time. So here's the plan, and let me show you exactly how this works with last week's webinar. This 20-minute session becomes my hub or primary content, and everything else becomes little atoms or smaller pieces of content that either directly link to and reference the webinar recording or are strong enough to stand alone and carry messages that are specific to my brand. So here's the title screen in case you needed a refresher on what that looks like. I was talking about the unclonable content framework, content that your competitors only wish that they could steal. There was a lot in here. It was super dense. So I have gathered up my content. I know the topic is pretty evergreen and it's on brand for me. I've also identified key parts of the webinar that should be sliced off or used to promote the webinar, and content that's strong enough to stand alone without any additional context. So now I get to move on to the next step, which is audiences and channels. The audience for this webinar is marketing practitioners, comm specialists, and go-to-market folks looking for a competitive edge with their content because they're stuck in the sea of same and sound like everybody else out there, and they can't differentiate themselves from their competitors. I know that they spend time on LinkedIn, on YouTube, a little Instagram, and maybe some Threads and Blue Sky, but like that's a reach. But if I have content that works on Threads and Blue Sky, I'm going to share it there because it's not much of a lift to publish it there. I also have an email list, so sending out an email would be good. And I have a website, so it needs to live there too. So I'm going to add all of those to little content bubbles that surround the big webinar so I know what I need to create. So these are the channels where they need to go. So right now I am a one-woman show, so my time's pretty limited. I have to make the most of whatever tools and time I have available to me because I don't want to be stuck at a computer all weekend long, optimizing a Friday webinar, right? Like that sucks. So based off of these channels, I'm going to need to work with video, text, and graphics, right? Like I can do that. Video, I fumble my way through Descript every week, but I'm getting better all the time. Text, type it out. I use Grammarly to make sure that I'm not abusing my commas too much because that's the thing for me. And then graphics. I have a brand kit set up in Canva to help me out. So I have a couple of templates there that I like to use. But now I have my content, my audiences, my channels, my formats. I need to make a list of all of the content that I need to create, again, so that I can spend as little time as possible doing this. This is what my list looks like. I use Google Sheets. It's quick, it's easy. I pay for the subscription, so it's already there. You can see that I have channels, the message. Again, be obnoxious with your message, right? And then the formats. What format does that content need to take in order to live in that particular channel? So now when I'm in Canva or Descript looking at the webinar transcript, I can really be efficient with my time. I know the text that I need to pull and modify. I know the visuals. I have little video identifiers and clips that I can pull. I know exactly what I need to create in each individual tool for that format. And so I can make things a lot faster. I mean, just keep yourself organized, use the tools that you already have. Tone adjustment is the final thing that I need to do. So if I'm doing video clips for LinkedIn, I might include like a snippet of text that gives a little bit of context to the video. And this might be a little bit more formal or polished than if I were to publish it on Instagram. But then again, like with all the AI slop out there, I actually might want to stand completely apart and be even more irreverent and sarcastic on LinkedIn on a channel where I normally would be super professional. We're going to see how that goes. It's all about experimentation as well. So from this one 20-minute webinar, I've created YouTube content, website content with a replay, and a blog post. The blog post is still in progress, but this is a screenshot of a previous week's blog post. I have 7 different video clips in both horizontal and vertical orientations for the different channels, ready to publish on different platforms. I also recorded and clipped a pitch for next week's webinar, which you might have already seen on LinkedIn. And I sent out an email about the webinar replay on a Sunday. And the transcripts that serve as the foundation for all this text-based content that supports other formats can stand alone. That's another 6 different social media posts that I could actually pull very easily. So all together, that's 16 different pieces of content, 15 for this webinar, 1 to pitch the one that's coming up, some directly supporting the webinar series and linking back to it, and some pieces are just standing alone without a link or a reference. But it's all content that I didn't have to recreate from scratch. I don't have to create any new ideas. I just harness parts and pieces of what I already had. And I haven't touched Canva for visual posts yet because I literally ran out of time and spoons this last week. And if I decided to shift the focus of all of these posts to chief revenue officers or customer success teams as the intended audience, I could slightly shift the focus of all the text posts and the intro to the video clips and align with their concerns and their competitive differentiators that they said, and double the amount of content with just a slight tweak. So there are lots of ways to modify what you already have to make sure that it works for you. And just a quick note, I also tell my clients that video is the ultimate content to repurpose because it's a higher lift to create and it's a lower lift to be able to take the text from it or to clip it or to grab screenshots or use the images that I'm using in this webinar as graphics. So it's a lot easier to atomize if you have video as the foundation than it is to try to walk into video and use text as the foundation to create a script. So if you're going to do anything and make that investment, invest in video first. And it's not actionable advice until I get to put it into or until you get to put it into practice. I've already put it into practice. You get to put it into practice now. So of course, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Here's your homework assignment. This week, I want you to pick just one piece of existing content. Don't overthink it. Pick something that's good, that's just sitting there. Could be something you enjoyed creating that feels especially relevant, or it aligns with a new insight that you just discovered about your customers or your audience. The trick here is that it needs to connect with your customers in some meaningful way. So use that as your basis to pick your content. Then I want you to brainstorm 3 different ideas that you could use or different ways to repurpose that content. Could it become a series of social posts, an email, an infographic? Is there a screenshot that you could grab from it? Is there something or a quote that you could turn into a graphic from a transcript? What is it that you can use and find a way to repurpose it 3 different ways? Next, take one of those ideas and adapt it for 2 different channels. Notice how the tone and the approach might change, especially if you pull a quote and you make a graphic out of your quote. Putting it on Instagram hits a little bit different than if you put it on LinkedIn, depending on your industry and depending on your audience. So you might want to just kind of shift the tone a little bit for those. And then finally, go ahead and schedule those pieces out over the next month. Don't post them all at once. You can go ahead and spread them out so you can get maximum value out of it. The goal here isn't perfection. It's proving to yourself that you can stop having to start from scratch and start working smarter with what you already have. Your content calendar doesn't have to be a source of stress. It can be a well-oiled machine that runs on content you've already created. You just need to give that content a second life. So that is all the time that we have today. Thanks again for spending time with me this week on Free Marketing Fridays, and I will see you next week.